Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Global Azure Austria edition, and welcome to a data session about Azure Synapse Analytics and Azure Purview, and how to connect your data artifacts in your company, in your environment, and how to get a better view about your data. My name is Wolfgang, and I'm really happy to be again here at the Global Azure Bootcamp. This year, like last year, it's virtually. And yeah, let's start into the topic. My contact details, if you want to reach me afterwards, I think the slides will be available. Otherwise, let's start why we are here today and why data is really, really important. What we've seen in the past is, well, data gets more and more important. It's not only the data itself, it's more like we have to use the data, because there were some slogans on that slide that were mentioned a long time ago, like that one, 2006, like data is the new oil. It's important. We need to, well, refine it to really use it. So data is not the same as refined data. And some call it the lifeblood of your business. And what I've seen in the past, or especially also in the last year, is that data gets more and more important, especially for small companies, like small shops somewhere. They had to close because of the lockdown. And many of them, they started a web shop. They started another part of their business, and they had to use the data that came from the web shop, like how many orders and what we have to order and so on and so forth. And data, yeah, it's getting more and more important. It's not the huge companies that have their data warehouse, that have their reporting. It's also the small companies that should focus on the data. And that's the topic of today, because data can also be seen like water. We need water to exist. And we need water and data to be accessible. And water and data needs to be clean in order to survive. For the water, it's our body to survive. For the data, well, it's the company. If we have clean and accessible data, we can use the data to get better. And that is, I think, one of the best things to do that you can do for your company. And there are two main approaches that are dealing in the data business. When we are talking about data analytics, data analysis, well, there is that stream of business analytics. And we had data warehouses, or we have data warehouses for structure data, for integrating data, for preparing data, for reports, for analytic reports, and so on and so forth. And on the other side, well, we have that kind of stream that is called data science, that is doing huge amounts of data analytics, that is working in the IoT field, like my colleague Mario talked about in the former session. And they are dealing with huge amounts of data that are mainly stored in a data lake. Separated there, stored there in a structure, and sometimes, not only sometimes, the data scientists, well, they have to do data exploration to find the data that is available in the data lake, to find some sort of important trends and data, well, information out of the data lake. And those are those two big streams where we can analyze the data. The more structured way, the business analytics, we know we have orders in that table, we have the customers in the table, and so on and so forth. And the data warehouse is that part of the story that deals with that part. And on the other side, the data lake, big data, IoT data, data science, machine learning, and everything and so on. And on that slide, well, it's an or, but we have to switch that or to an and, because those two big streams, they can't live without the other in nowadays, because many companies switched from only having structural data in the data warehouse into a, well, we also have some production data, we have sensors, we have values from some log files we want to analyze, we have web shops, and so on and so forth. So it's coming together and not a separated and or decision. What we also have is there are many options when we have to deal with data. Let's focus on the upper right one, like here. When we deal with data, we have data that is stored on premises. We have data that is generated in the cloud. We have structured data like relational structured data. We have semi-structured or unstructured data like, well, sensor values, JSON files. We have images, we have videos, we have streaming data, we have batch loads, we have everything that is, well, somehow related around the data. And that is only one part of the story, because we have also a huge list of technologies, how we can work with the data, where we can store the data in data warehouses, databases, in a data lake, in a spreadsheet. We can work with the data and analyze the data using ML models, database queries. We can use many different tools like open source projects. We can use commercial projects and tools to analyze the data. So data is widespread. Technologies, that field, even much more widespread. And then we have the people, the skills of the people that have to do the work. And people, well, they have some sort of education. When I have a look at myself, well, I'm coming from the SQL side. I'm creating data warehouses since more than a decade now, and I'm was mainly focused on the SQL side. And there are other parts of the story, like people that are focused and really good in doing data analysis with Python, with R, with other types. They are good in data modeling. They are good in data integration. They have some analytic skills. They are experts in data cleansing, data quality. And that is the huge problem we are facing now. We not only have data silos, like 5 different source systems where we have to get the data to analyze. We have many different colors, flavors, structures of data. We have hundreds of tools we can use, and we have people with different skills. And we have to think about a solution to solve that one. So the question is the good old data warehouse, like we were used to build, is it still relevant? And is it still part of the story? Or, well, are there other ways how to structure and analyze the data? And when we think about all those different options in the data, technology, and skills field, well, there is a wall with many different sheets on it and many different options. And the huge question is, should you go left, right, or turn around and go backwards, leftwards, whatever? So there are many options. And one of those options I would like to introduce today, well, it's called a data warehouse in the cloud. And that part on that slide, it's a reference architecture that is not really up to date, but I want to show you some sort of the history of getting into that field. And Mario already talked about the data factory, that part that is responsible for loading data from on-premises, from other sources, from the cloud or whatever, to store it somewhere in the data lake. And then we have to analyze the data, and we can do it with the 2 different flavors. I've talked about the big data side, the data science side, and here it's mentioned Azure Databricks. For the data warehousing, for the structured side, it's mentioned here with the Azure SQL Data Warehouse, which is now, just a short look in the future, It's the Azure Synapse Analytics, the SQL pools. And we have those two flavors separated, the big data analytics and the relational data warehousing approach. And for the more detailed analytics, Azure Machine Learning, and for the visualizations, for the reporting, Power BI. But Microsoft said, well, we've got good tools out in the field. There are good solutions. They work really, really well. But what we need is we need to combine and get together and build a better solution, a better integrated solution. And the answer, what Microsoft proposed and introduced and released, was Azure Synapse Analytics, which, as you can see now, is responsible for the data integration, for the big data, and the data warehousing tasks. So we have one big thing. It looks like one big thing, but we will get into that for more details, to handle all the required tasks for building a data warehouse, a modern data warehouse in the cloud. And now we're getting a little bit deeper into that Synapse Analytics. We've got the data sources on the left side. And what we need is the data integration. The data integration, that one is the data factory that is renamed and integrated into the so-called Synapse Analytics workspace. And within the Synapse Analytics workspace, they are called Synapse pipelines. So data integration is the best of breed coming from the data factory, Synapse pipelines. And then we have the storage. And the storage is based and focused around Azure Data Lake Storage Generation 2. So we have a data lake in there. Synapse Analytics, a workspace, needs one dedicated storage account to run, to exist. So we have a data lake required for Synapse Analytics to work. And when we get the data through the Synapse pipelines into the data lake, we need to analyze the data. And there are two flavors included here. And as you can see, well, we've got that Spark thing. We've heard it. Maybe you've attended the session of Mario. The Spark thing, the distributed, the big data analytics thing, the Spark Analytics runtime in Azure Synapse. And on the other side, we've got the SQL-based analytic runtimes in there. Mention the S at the end, analytic runtimes. We will see that there are multiple flavors. And what we need is we need a tool to develop and to manage everything. That one is called Azure Synapse Studio. What is really, really important is that part of the security. With the initial architecture where we've seen the data factory, Databricks, and the SQL data warehouse, security was there, definitely was there, but we had different security systems for every part of the story. And now we've got an integrated security story, which is focused and based on Azure Active Directory, where Azure Active Directory is used to configure all the security stuff in there. And what we also have in there is, well, we need to manage all the runtimes and so on and so forth. We need to manage the security and also the monitoring. And what is there on the outbound arrows, like here, Azure Synapse Analytics works with or uses the concept of linked services. So not everything is brought into the Synapse workspace, but you can also use the linked services to connect to other systems. And well, how does that one really work? Sounds like a little bit of magic. And let's dive even more deeper, because there are other things we should talk and see. And we are now in the Synapse Analytics platform, which is the Synapse Analytics workspace. And we've got the data lake in there. And security is mentioned here. It's a way to store the data. It's a way to cheaply store the data. It's a way to store huge amounts of data. And then the data integration, Synapse pipelines. And now it's a little bit more talk about the details of the analytic runtimes. SQL-based versus Spark-based. I've already talked about that one. But for the SQL analytic runtimes, we have two different flavors. We've got one flavor that is called provision, dedicated. Those SQL clusters, well, you configure that one, you select the performance level you can scale up and scale down, and that one is massively parallel in the background. We've got 60 data distributions, we've got multiple compute nodes depending on the performance level, and that is the part that is there and you request the required performance level. On the other hand, we've got another approach of analytic runtime, which is called serverless. And that one is, well, serverless, it's there when you need it, and it's shutting down, pausing if you don't need it. And those are two different flavors of SQL analytic runtimes. And they both have two different approaches where you should or can use them. As of today, the serverless pool is much more focused in the data exploration of your data lake. It's not able, as of today, to store data, but you can build a logical layer above your data lake. I will show you how really easy it is. And for the Apache Spark, we've got the provisioned approach. So we have a cluster defined, and when we need it, we start it up, and if we don't need it, we pause it, but we have it in a fixed level of capacity. And it's the same with the provision, the dedicated SQL pools. You can start them up and you only pay for the time they are running. The storage, well, it costs you all the time. For the development, and that is the part where the different skills of the people come in, it's an option to create data engineering, machine learning solutions within Synapse Studio, within the Spark approach, where you can use different languages. You can build notebooks within the Synapse environment, and you can write different code cells using different languages. You can start with SQL. That was my part and my start of the story. I wanted to solve everything in SQL. But then we had some discussions, and my colleague said, hey, in Python, it's only 2 lines and not 25 lines in SQL. So I started to get into the Python area. And there are other language options like Java, Scala, R, .NET that can be used within your notebooks. And every cell just takes the output and can access the output of the other cells. So it's really an integrated way, and where people coming into the project with different skill sets can work on the project. The connected services, the linked services, I've already mentioned them. If you have data already in a data lake somewhere, if you have data or some projects developed using Azure Machine Learning, HD Insight, whatever, there are the linked services where you can create a connection to the outside and use that linked services outside there. And what I really like about that concept of the linked services, and it's also a little bit about the name of the service, it's Azure Synapse Analytics. And maybe, I hope you've heard about those cells in our brain and those connections between our brain cells, those synapses, where we get better, we learn when brain cells get together and get connected. And that's the idea behind Synapse Analytics, to connect your data within your company to get better analytic results. And now it's time for demos. Are there any questions? So please feel free to put your questions into the YouTube chat, and I will answer them. I will try to answer them, and just feel free to ask if there is anything unclear so far. Azure Synapse Analytics. Well, it's an Azure service. So we can create one here or start creating one here. And when we create one, well, it's not that kind of funny, so I won't do it. But if we have a look at an existing one, what we can see is that the Synapse workspace, if my internet just wants to load it, let's see. Yes, we are getting there. At least I try. Let's see. Okay. Was too fast for the refresh. What is in a Synapse workspace, what we can see in our configured workspace is the list of artifacts that are in there. So we have the data lake that is in, or that is required for the Azure Synapse workspace to function. So we have the data lake in here, and we've got the dedicated SQL pools, the serverless SQL pools, and we've got some pools already defined. So let's see if they are, yeah, they appeared here. And in my example, I've got Apache Spark pools. So I've got 2 Apache Spark pools pre-configured, but not running so far because they are starting up whenever they are needed. And we can configure them in different sizes. What we've also already created in our environment are SQL pools. And the 2 different flavors, the built-in one is the serverless one. So that one is just there, and every Synapse workspace has 1 serverless pool. And 2 dedicated SQL pools are created in my environment. And what we see here is we can create them in different performance levels. We can create them in different sizes. And what really matters is the data is distributed in the background for the dedicated pools. 60 databases in the background. And what we get with a much higher performance level are more compute nodes, because somebody has to do the work. Whenever there's a query hitting the dedicated pool, the query is separated because we have to look for the data in every of the 60 distributions. And if we have more compute nodes, well, we can do more in the same time. So it's getting faster, but it's also getting more expensive because we need compute in there. And what we also have and what we need is the Synapse Studio. That one is the development approach or the development environment for our Synapse environment. And what we see is our, well, steps we have to do or we can do. We can ingest data coming from somewhere and load the data into our Synapse workspace. We want to explore and analyze the data. And last but not least, we want to visualize the data. But now the question is, Power BI, it's not directly integrated into our Synapse workspace. Yeah, that's correct. It's a linked service. So we can link one Power BI workspace into our Synapse environment. And last but not least, for those that want to learn and start with Synapse Analytics, I highly recommend the Knowledge Center, the Learn Center. So you have got the Knowledge Center link in there. And that is the starting point where you can immediately start working with Synapse. Even if you don't have data in a data lake, in a cloud database, there are samples in there. And you can start with a sample using Spark, you can start with a sample using SQL, or you can create external tables. And you can also have a look at the gallery. And the gallery is really nice because there are public data sets in there. So you can connect to a public data set. Well, there is COVID data in there, but there is also New York taxi data in there that is holding every taxi trip in New York City. And based on that, well, there are samples for notebooks, there are samples for SQL scripts, and even integration pipelines. So really nice way to start and get into the Synapse environment and the Synapse development. But back to the overall story, what you see on the left side, it's the main menu. We've got different, Microsoft calls it tabs. So we've got the data tab in there. And when I switch to the data tab, what we see here is the workspace and it's the linked part. And everything that is contained under the workspace, it's the list of databases that exist in my Synapse workspace. And what we can see, we have 3 different flavors. We've got the dedicated pools, they are marked green. And we've got serverless databases, and I marked them red. And we've got, oh my God, and we've got the last flavor, the blue ones, those are Spark databases. So we are able to store and work with the data using the different analytic runtimes in our Synapse workspace. What we can also do is we can open the, it's an object browser, like you know from the Management Studio, right-click, select top from the dim date, and that's clear, Wolfgang, you selected an empty one. Let's see if defect orders contains, no, oh my God. Let's take the slow one, that one sounds nice. Now it's getting strange. Yeah, we've got data in here. So we can execute a query. We can select the database or the database pool where we want to connect to, and even the database. So similar to the development approach in Management Studio or other database tools. What is really interesting is the linked services. And we can create external linked services, like selecting from the list and hitting and entering the data or the service definition into our object browser. And we can have a look at the data lake that is somewhere connected to my part of the story. So we can have a look at the data in going into the different subdirectories. And what you can start here, it's the data exploration. And that is a part and task of very often of the data scientists to get a look at the different tables, the files, the different data information that is stored in data lake. And what you can do is you can have a preview in there. So get some sneak peek what is in the data lake in that specific file. What you can also do is we can do right click. We can start with the data exploration using SQL, or we can go into the notebook feeling and we get a generated notebook, a starting notebook that already contains the URL and so on and so forth. We need to select the Spark pool that should be used after we hit the run cell. And let's start that one. And what is done in the background, the Apache Spark pool, well, it's generating the cluster nodes, it's starting up the cluster nodes, and then we get the results back. So on the other way, we can analyze the data using the SQL approach. And what we are using now, it's the built-in, the SQL serverless approach. And let's start the query in there. And what we can do is, well, we get the data back, but the data is not really formatted because Synapse needs a little bit more of information. Like we have a field terminator that is the semicolon. Let's put it that way. Yeah, we get the different columns, and we can define like first row is second row. So we eliminate the column or the column heading. And what we can add here is we can define the information about the column structure in there. So we get the information that state code is text-based and the year is number and the population total is a number. And what we can also do is we can filter to the city name, like the town I'm living, and we can have a look at the population over the last years, how it evolved. We can also have a quick look at the data using the built-in charting possibility, and we can have the population over there. Oh my God, what's up here? So imagine you see a beautiful chart in there. So data exploration done really, really easy within the Synapse Studio, the query approach. So we can start and build data exploration scripts using the, let's try it again. I don't know why it doesn't work. Let's see. It's really slow today. So going back to that one. Starting that one, so we've got the different information pieces in there. And what is really nice, what we can do is we can add some wildcards in there, because in that directory, I've got the data up to the year 2019, and I have one file that is containing data from 2020. So what we can do is we can add some wildcards in here. And what the serverless pool now does, well, it reads all the files that are based on the wildcard format. So everything is read, and as you can see, we've got the data in here. What we can do as a next step is we can create a few based on that select statement that is querying files in your data lake. So that is a really huge approach where we can build some sort of logical data warehouse, where we can build like one view that is querying the data in the data lake. And that view can be based or can be used to do some further data transformation to serve as a source for the next step of your data preparation pipeline. And as I'm talking about the data preparation pipeline, we have to talk about the data integration. And data integration is done with Synapse pipelines. Synapse pipelines are based on Data Factory. So what you see here, it's, if you know Azure Data Factory, Synapse pipelines should be a go. Because what we can do is we can add some copy tasks in here and read data from a source, read or write data to a sink. And what we need is we need some sort of outbound connection. We need a connection to another service, to another data source piece. And that pieces are called data sets. And data sets are based and configured using a specialized linked service. So here, the story comes back to the linked services. We register external services. And those external services, they can be used for querying the data lake, the external data lakes, or to create integration data sets based on that external service. And we can build pipelines in there to load data, to copy data, to execute data flows. And what is really important and interesting here, we've got that concept of data flows in here. So I'm switching back to the develop environment. And with the data flows, we've got a user interface-based data preparation pipeline, which looks quite nice from the outside. And it's really, really powerful because in the background, those graphical data flows, they are transferred and executed in Spark clusters. So what we define here using, well, select those columns, filter newer entries, and so on and so forth, aggregating and writing that data back to a database. It looks nice from the user interface part, but in the background, that one is executed in parallel on a cluster, on a Spark-based cluster in that environment. So data integration done really, really easy. As we are in the Develop Hub, we've got the SQL scripts. So we can store SQL scripts within our Synapse workspace. And what we also can do is we can connect to a code repository. So we can store everything, our history of data, scripts, of notebooks, of pipelines, and so on and so forth in an external code repository. And we can publish that one, and we have the history, who changed what, when. What is also there, well, it's the monitoring thing. we can have a look at all those pipeline runs. We can have a look at the integration runtimes. And the integration runtimes, those are the ground stations for your data factory, for your Synapse pipelines, because we need one part that is running locally in your on-premises data network to get the access to the on-premises data. And we can have a look at the SQL pools. What we could do now is, let's go over here. We could go to the manage pools, and the scaling is here. We could scale that one up. So actually we are running, I think, at the data warehousing units 200 level, but we could go up to the, oh my God, I have not enough quota in my Azure environment. So that one is $360 per hour, and the smallest one is $1, and the one we are currently using is $2. And we can pause that. So if we don't need the dedicated pool, we pause that. It's not costing you any compute. The storage in the background, well, you have to pay that one. And that one is in the manage part. So we have the different options like the Git configurations, the credentials, the access control, who should be allowed to be an administrator, who should be allowed to work with the SQL pools, and so on and so forth. And you can get the SQL or the security into the data lake. Mario mentioned it. You have security available for every folder, every file in your data lake. You can even specify the security in your dedicated pool. So very, very handy. And well, it's Azure Active Directory that is used in here. And we've talked about the data integration. We've talked about the development stuff. And I've missed one because the development stuff, it's already mentioning Power BI in here. And let's see for the linked services. And I've got one Power BI linked service configured. What you do is you create a linked service to Power BI, and you select one workspace. For those of you that know Power BI, workspaces, or don't know Power BI, workspaces are some grouping mechanism in Power BI in the service. And we are connecting our Synapse environment to one workspace in there. And if we go to the develop, we can open that one. We see the workspace, and in a workspace, we've got the list of data sets, the data models that are stored in there, and also the list of reports. One plus is you don't have to exit the Synapse environment. You can create, for example, a new report directly in the Synapse environment. You don't have to move into Power BI, and you just put that one over here and the average rating, and or let's put the number of movies and the year in there, and let's see that one in a matrix, or maybe let's put it here. So we've got some line chart in there directly working with data coming from a dedicated pool. And you can also have a look at the already created reports in there. And you just open that one. You can do a table date filtering. You can select the genre you're working with, and so on and so forth. So directly integrated, and that is one of those main things. It's not only the data sources, the data silos that are integrated, it's also the external services that really work well with the Synapse approach. Whenever you've got some data lake somewhere, whenever you want to create Power BI reports, you can create linked services to directly link it into your Synapse workspace. And the Synapse workspace, well, it's not only there, it's really integrated with the tools. I already talked about the Power BI integration, about the data lake, the external mappings, and so on and so forth. But there are also plans that those two tools can get better together. Because sometimes you have some queries that take some time because you are dealing with millions, billions of rows, and you have to analyze the data. And what is planned and coming this year in August, it's the performance accelerator for Azure Synapse, which analyzes all those queries that are coming from Power BI into the dedicated pools. And what the magic in the background does, it generates materialized views. So it somehow caches the data in the background. But you don't have to deal with the create materialized view, get the data from a profiler or another tool and put it in there. It's done automatically in the background. So really, really nice feature to get those two different separated services better together. But there is something more, because Synapse is there for doing data analytics. What we are focusing on when dealing with Synapse, get data from somewhere, put it into an umbrella, the Synapse workspace, use different kinds of flavors of analytic runtimes, Spark-based, SQL-based, different languages for different people, and build powerful and good data stories about that. But that is just one part of the story, because when we deal with environments in organizations, we have different data islands. We have data silos, and only one of them, only one of them, it's the Synapse environment. We have SharePoint lists. We have other clouds maybe somewhere that are storing data required for our business. And what we need to do is we need to build bridges to connect those different islands, because an island is good and nice if you want to be separated, but to get an overall view about all your data islands in your company, we need to connect them. And sometimes we get beautiful bridges like here, and sometimes, we have some sort of bridges in there and we need to connect them. And there is one thing that works into that direction, and that is relatively new. It's a new service in the Azure cloud. It's called Azure Purview. It's a data governance service. It's a data catalog service. And as you can see, we have different data islands on premises, software as a service, multi-cloud, and also one island, the Synapse Analytics workspace, because it's just a place where data lives and where some data transformation happens. And what we can do with Azure Purview is we can build a data map. We can catalog the data artifacts that are there, and we can try to build some bridges and try to find all those ships that are coming from one continent to the other. And we want to see those traces where my data comes from and where my data goes to, and especially what kind of data is stored there. Because with data governance, we have to look for the different sources. It doesn't matter where they are living, on premises or in the cloud. We have to discover trusted data. We do some classification, like that is sensitive data, that is an email address, that is a credit card, and so on and so forth. And we need to understand our data supply chain. As we've seen with the Suez Canal, if there is a problem, data or ships or goods can't flow. And we want to know where are those transit channels, how our data flows. And business context. Put some glossary on that data islands, on that data artifacts, and everything, sometime in the future should be possible with the Azure Purview. So Azure Purview, it's the unified data governance service. And as I'm approaching the end of my session, I'm gonna dive through it very, very fast. It's the data map. That is the part where Azure Purview stores the different data islands, stores the different, when we're dealing with the database, the tables, the columns, and also the classification. Like in the column email address, there is email address data in there. There is credit card numbers in the column credit card number. And that one is done by using automated scanning and classification approach. And what we also have is, we need a unified experience. And that one is very similar to the Synapse environment. We have this Purview Studio, where we can query the data catalog, where we can search, where we can define business glossary, and where we can have a look at the data lineage. And also data insights, how many files, how many different data types, and so on. And also, haha, what is there? Oh my God, there are some linked services. So that one is really, really comparable to the Synapse approach. External services, well, we get the data, we classify the structure coming from there. And if it's not sufficient, if there is a scanner missing for a service or whatever, the Purview catalog, it's based on an open API, the Apache Atlas API, and you can add your data artifacts in there. In the Purview Studio, I've talked about it. It's the main entry. Let's switch to the demo. So that is the Purview Studio. It looks similar to the Synapse Studio. And what we have here, it's the Knowledge Center. And that Knowledge Center, well, it's not that kind of cool like the other Knowledge Center in Synapse. Have a look, try some videos and some learning things. But what is really nice is we can have a look at the sources, and we can have a look at all the registered sources within my Purview instance with all the different kind of source types. So the list of supported source types gets longer. And if we want to register a new one, we can have a look at the sources in here. And we have cloud sources like Azure Resource Groups, data lakes, databases in the cloud, and also some on-premises connectors like SQL Server, Oracle, SAP, which can be just give me your SAP structure and it's analyzed in there. And what is really nice, it's the map view. That one gives you a graphical representation of your data landscape. And you can structure that as you like. So I've got one business intelligence collection in here, and I've structured it for data lakes, Synapse, and databases, and also some Azure resources. And what is behind that resource, let's go over here, it's a data lake storage account. What you can define is a data lake scan in there. And the scan, what it does is it connects to the data source, and it gets the information. What are the files in there? What are the structure of the files, and so on and so forth. And we can have a look at the scans and all the sources, like for the Power BI. Let's go over here. Another scan is done, 285 artifacts in there. And what is really nice, go back to the overall view, it's the browse artifacts. So we can have a look at the different types of artifacts that are there. Let's go over here, and we get Power BI datasets and Power BI reports in there. And we've got some properties in there. And what is really nice, it's the data estate, where comes my data and where goes my data. It's the data lineage approach. So it's here, and you can switch to that Azure and go directly to the Power BI report, or the Power BI dataset, sorry. What you can also do is you can search your data catalog, and you can have a look and filter your data based on criteria, like what are the source types? Like I want to list only the Azure SQL database criteria. I want to list only tables containing phone numbers, email addresses, and I just select one of those entries. What you can see here is the schema classification, and that one is done automatically. If you scan a source, there are system-defined scanning rules. And what Purview does is it has a look at your data, and it tries to classify, like we've got email addresses, person name, EU phone number, and US phone number in that table. And we've got some properties, and we've got the schema. And the schema is here, and having the classification in there. So also the data lineage, and it's also there what you see and what we can have a look, it's also capturing the data lineage transformation from Azure Data Factory copy activities. So even if you use some external tool, it's capturing the lineage data. So a very, very nice way to get the overview about your data, to get the 10,000 level, 10,000 meter level of your data estate, bridging your data islands within your company data and having some sort of classification, structuring the data, and well, know your data better. And with that, I'm at the end of my session. What I tried to show you in the last 50 minutes, it was Azure Synapse Analytics, an integrated analytics platform in the cloud for different kinds of data, different kinds of people using different kinds of technologies. SQL, Spark, it doesn't matter which language you want to use to program. It doesn't really matter where your data comes from. And you can link all your services that you already use and combine it with your Synapse. And the second part, well, data estate in your company, Azure Purview as a data catalog solution as of today to analyze your data estates, to get more information about your data estates, to specify the experts on certain data information pieces, and to know your data better. And that is the thing we are doing at Qubito. We try to understand your and our customers' data better to build better solutions out of your data. And with that, enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks for attending my session. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I haven't seen, or just have a closer look, no comments in the chat. If you have any comments afterwards, just ping me, send me an email, contact me on Twitter. I'd be happy to answer the questions. And with that, enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.